All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to be introducing our guest today. Mother Agapia was raised in a family with a strong tradition of serving the Greek Orthodox Church in America. During her college years at the University of Michigan, she joined a friend on a trip to Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville, New York, and soon began attending services of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. As her Orthodox faith deepened, she discerned a calling to a monastic life, and in 1991 was made a novice at the newly established Skete of St. Elizabeth, of St. Elizabeth, the new Martyr in Jordanville. After a trip to Jerusalem in May 1996, she received a blessing to join the larger and well-established Convent of St. Mary Magdalene in Jerusalem. In September 1998, she was appointed administrator of the Convent's Orthodox Girls' School of Bethany. And for those who don't know, Bethany in Arabic is Al-Azarya. Located just over the Mount of Olives in the Palestinian town of Al-Azarya, serving at this school until August 2005, a time which coincided with the Second Intifada. She became intimately connected to the lives and struggles of the local Palestinians, both Christian and Muslim. Due to upheaval in the political situation and within the church, she returned to New York in 2008, where her current community, the Convent of St. Nicholas of Myra, was established in May 2009. Her ministry at the convent has included organizing youth retreats and maintaining her ties to the Holy Land, both by organizing twice yearly pilgrimages and by inviting young Palestinian Christians to the convent each summer to take part in social, cultural, and religious activities. The relationships developed between young Orthodox Christians in Palestine and the United States has been a source of joy and encouragement. The convent recently relocated to Owego, New York, to be closer to St. Maximus the Confessor Orthodox Church, whose members have long and faithfully supported the endeavors of the community. Thank you so much, Mother Agapia, for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be with you.
Man, it is such an honor for you to be with us and talking about this subject: Palestinian Christians under occupation and life in the Holy Land. Can you describe what everyday life is like for Palestinian Christians under Israeli occupation and what it means to be both Palestinian and Christian today?
Right. Well, truthfully, there's no distinction. Whether you're Christian or Muslim, as a Palestinian, your life is one of great difficulty. I think everyone is pretty much aware of the situation in Gaza, where we have a large Orthodox Christian community that has been suffering so greatly for the last 2 years. Many people have been killed there. Many people have died due to lack of medications, of water and sufficient food, but they continue to pray in a church that dates from the 6th century, as well as the Catholic community there in northern Gaza. But in the West Bank, where the places where Christ was born, where he preached his message of salvation, Christians are treated very badly. The effects of the occupation means that most people have had some of their lands confiscated, or are finding it difficult this time of year to be able to pick their olives in October with armed settlers on their property, with the greater number of checkpoints, even within urban centers. For example, within Bethlehem, I think another 57 checkpoints were added. So you're talking about a small area, and people aren't even able to travel to go to the other end of town without difficulty at times. For example, I was in Bethany, Al-Azarya, this past September. I was able to get in through the settler road in to visit the school where I used to be at relatively quickly. But when we tried to leave about noon that day, it took us nearly 2 hours to go the 1 mile to get towards the settlement highway, because they'd put up a mobile checkpoint and just delayed people being able to travel on the road.
When was this?
This was in September 2025.
Wow. So this is recent,
ago.
where just in the past year, they over 800 checkpoints have been added inside of the West Bank between Palestinian villages.
Right. Yeah. So when I first came, I entered through Jordan, went in the northern West Bank, and you just don't know whether it's going to take 1 hour or 3 hours to get from one location to another. And a lot of people, I remember talking to a friend who lives in Bethlehem but works in Ramallah, has family in Ramallah, which is less than 20 miles away. They've given up the idea of trying to go and to visit family or to work because it just gets too difficult to do. So this is the type of thing. And so when it comes to, as a Christian, your life is dependent on the whims of the Israeli government. So at Easter time or Christmas time, they did give some permits to Christians in the West Bank to be able to go into Jerusalem. But that can be taken out. First, it's only for a few days. And then you don't know. It might be that 2 members of the family get the permits and the rest don't. So how do you celebrate the religious holiday when not all the family can even travel together to go someplace?
Yeah, exactly. And we know that, like you were mentioning, Israel restricts all movement for Palestinians, and even trying to apply for a permit, which in Arabic is a tasrih, is so difficult to obtain. And for Palestinian Christians in Bethlehem, they are not able to go to Jerusalem's Holy Sepulchre Church without a permit. How does that restriction affect their spiritual life and sense of belonging?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most important, there's people that come all over the world, save up their pennies, right, to be able to visit the Holy Sepulchre, the place where Christ is buried, the tomb of Christ. And someone who lives 7 miles away can only do it maybe if they jump through the hoops and get the permit to do so. So it's a great sadness. And also, as a Christian, your life is one of moving from feast day, from holiday to holiday within the Christian tradition. And you want to, especially being in the Holy Land, you want to be able to go to the locations where Christ was, just like a pilgrim does. But not only can you not go to the Holy Sepulchre, or only with great difficulty. For example, in the summer, we have the Feast of the Transfiguration up on Mount Tabor, and now the Israelis are making it, they use the claim of safety, and they block people, both Palestinians living in Israel and those in the West Bank, from coming, saying that we can't have too many people because it's a safety problem. But when Jews have their holidays and traditions, great numbers of people are allowed to attend, and without the police stopping the number of people being able to go there.
And you've lived there since 1996, or you lived there. How has life in the Holy Land in Palestine changed for Christians over the decades you've been there?
It's only gotten worse. So I moved there in 96, and then in 98, I was assigned to the school, so I got to know very much about the communities themselves, not living just within the convent gates. And so in 2000, when the Intifada started, September 2000, when they began the establishment of the building, the security wall, and the checkpoints. So life was difficult, but what's even worse, over the last 25 years, and especially the last 2 years, the increase in the checkpoints and the increase in harassment and violence has greatly increased. So there's so many different levels to the harassment and persecution of Christians right now. We just had a statement from the patriarchs, the leaders of the churches in Jerusalem, and they talked about the problem. Their important consideration was that people in the West have to understand that the Christian Zionists do not represent the Christians that live in the Holy Land, and that their actions and policies and what they help promote are actually hurting the Christians. The Israeli government imposes large taxes on the churches in Jerusalem. They are confiscating property. Under the guise of calling things archaeological parks, they're planning to take over large portions of neighborhoods on the Mount of Olives, where my convent was, and basically wiping out the Muslim and Christian presence and creating only Jewish neighborhoods in very, very important Christian areas.
And this is kind of you're exactly where I was going to ask the question of this misconception by Christians abroad, and specifically the Western Christians that are unaware of the realities that Palestinian Christians face. This notion that we must support Israel politically, as Christians that is being spread, especially amongst like evangelical Christians. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding Western Christians have about Palestinian Christians? And yesterday I was actually scrolling through on TikTok, and I found a pastor that was saying he had an Israeli flag. He's an American Christian. He had an Israeli flag in the background and an American flag. And somebody asked him, why is the Israeli flag higher than the American flag? And his response was, because I'm a citizen of heaven, or the land of heaven, or whatever it is. So this misconception about Israel now, as a Christian, what would your response be to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Christians of Palestine are people who many families can trace their roots to the beginning of Christ's time. Or certainly, many times I'll go into churches and museums in Bethlehem, in Taiba, a Christian village, and you'll see pictures dating from the early 1800s of Palestinian Orthodox priests. So the problem for Christian evangelicals is that their history only begins, if you're a Christian Zionist, the Bible they refer to, the Schofield Bible, it was only created in the 1820s. And I can show you descriptions of Palestinian Orthodox Christians from way before that time. So the problem is they don't recognize that there have been Christians in the Holy Land for all these centuries, because they follow a different form of Christian theology. So we really, and their idea that they have to support the current 1948 state of Israel as thinking that that's something biblical is just a misconception. Really a heresy. It's a wrong way of thinking. In the way of traditional Christians, whether they be Orthodox, Catholic, Lutheran, we know that you have to read the New Testament, not just the Old Testament. Christ came, yes, and he called the people of Israel to follow him. They said to follow Christ. The problem with these Christian evangelicals is they stop at the Old Testament, and they don't recognize Christ as the Messiah that came and is the new Israel. That has nothing to do with 1948 state of Israel. And so it's a big confusion and misconception. And in that misconception, they're recognizing the Christians that actually live there today.
And what can, Palestinian Christians, for example, how can we really spread, or how can they spread, like as Palestinians, spread the truth about what is going on? You hear that Israel is this democracy, and Christians, like we saw Bibi Netanyahu said that this is the land where Christians can come and are welcome, but we know that is the opposite. What can Palestinian Christians do to really, in terms of advocacy and really spreading the truth about what they are going through under occupation?
Right. It's a different little. Well, the first thing is we have to tell our stories, not be shy about it. So if you're a person of strong belief and you want to work simply within your churches yourself, it's to tell the stories of what is, and make the link. My life has been now, I basically was forced out of Jerusalem in 2006, not welcome there anymore, and
Really?
live. But I take pilgrimages there every year. So the biggest thing we can do is come and see. So if you are a part of a church, contact me, contact people like Telos Group or Fasna.org, Friends of Sabeel North America. They take people and you go and see and you meet Palestinian Christians. So you have your parish at home and they come to meet the Christians in Palestine, and then you begin to understand their story. Because unfortunately in the mainstream media and the narrative that Israel pushes and is so strong in the media is that what's going on is this battle between Muslims and Jews, and that Christians don't even exist. So you have to come and see, and then beyond prayer, once you've come and see and educated yourself a little bit, why should the Christian Zionists be able to control the political landscape? Just like Pastor John Hagee, who's a Christian evangelical, formed a group called Christians United for Israel. I've been very honored to meet, I've gone to many demonstrations in America or marches on behalf of Palestine. And often I met people from Jewish Voice for Peace or not in our name. And I think we have to build up organizations, Christians, saying not in our name should these policies be allowed to continue. Should America be giving so many dollars for offensive weapons for Israel, or for continued to offering them diplomatic support? You know, we put sanctions on countries like Russia, on their leaders, or on Iran. But what Israel has committed the last 2 years are documented war crimes, yet we remain silent. And instead, anybody who speaks out against the Israeli policies is considered to be the illegal one. So,
And
as Christians, we have to speak out and go to our politicians and say we don't agree with these policies, and start organizing ourselves. Some ways we can do that. There's small Christian groups, Christians for Middle East Peace, the Telos group that I mentioned. But what I found is I'll make a plug for a new policy, the organization formed by the political advocacy group created by Josh Paul and Tarek Habash, an Orthodox Christian who were working in the State Department, resigned because of the policies of the United States, and are now working on Capitol Hill to try to advocate for more honest policies by the United States towards Israel. And what that means is that we have, if you want me to go into the politics of it, there was a law by Senator Leahy from Vermont, where if we're going to give weapons to other countries, they have to be accountable for them. They can't be using them to commit war crimes. Israel has been off the hook has gotten off the hook. We continue to give them weapons, even though they commit war crimes with those weapons. So, as Christians, we should go to our politicians and say, why are we allowing this to happen?
yeah, and I think people, Christians don't understand that also, because when you said that if you speak out against Israel, you're looked at as you're illegal, or it's a crime, and that's both whether you're Palestinian Muslim or Palestinian Christian. They do not differentiate, as we saw in Gaza. Palestinian Christians were also being genocided. So they do not care whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, as long as you're Palestinian, you are treated, quite frankly, the exact same way, especially as we're seeing, I think just a year or two ago, another Christian village near Bethlehem in Beit Jela was also taken so that they can build another settlement. So this happens
Not just another, this month, Bet Sahur, Shepherd's Field, 3 kilometers from the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem. They've just confiscated. This is going on as we speak. And this is becoming, I tell you, I go on pilgrimage all the time. When I go on pilgrimage, we start in the north, near Burkine, up near Nazareth. And there's the town of Sebastia. Israel what has a church from the 6th century that was dedicated to St. John the Baptist. It's just north of Nablus. Israel has just confiscated 450 acres. Basically, they're going to move the Palestinians that live there out of that land and control the archaeological and the church site, which means, and I know Christians who are buried on that property, and they would go and take care of the tombs of their grandparents and parents, and now they won't have access to that place anymore. That's up in the northern West Bank. You go to Taiba, which is just 15 miles from Jerusalem, a town with 4 Christian churches. There have been numerous attacks. There was just an attack yesterday where, again, they burned cars and sprayed graffiti. Basically, price tag attacks, they're called. So these are direct attacks against Christians in the West Bank. And Bet Sahur that I mentioned, Shepherd's Field, the land of Christians has just been confiscated. There were plans to build a hospital there for the local community. Israel is saying they're taking the land over.
Yeah, and this is the reality of any Palestinian living in the land. And with that, like, how is faith preserved and practiced under occupation and daily uncertainty for Christians?
Yeah, the most encouraging thing to me, or inspiring, I should say, is that I know a number of young priests that live in the West Bank, and what this has caused them to do is go deeper into their own faith. When you're persecuted, when in basically the whole world is against you, it seems like, who do we have to call upon except God? So you go to church, you pray, they try to keep a positive attitude in spite of what's going on, and encourage their young people especially to become people of faith. And I've never been more inspired than when I go to churches now in Bethlehem, in the northern West Bank, and everybody is in church and they pray with their full heart. when you're under siege, that's when you sense the need and the need for God, and that to know that your peace comes from God in the end. Whatever they do to us, I have trust in my Lord. And I can say that's the same for Christians as well as for Muslims. How many times have I called or talked to friends, when bombs have been falling, or when there's been harassment, or they're ready to take over their olive trees, or there's bombing going on, and my hands are in the hands of God. So they try to keep their faith by living their faith in spite of the persecution. And I think they
And
have a depth of faith that we in the West are lacking.
yeah, I agree. And, this is like a question for you. Have you ever faced any sort of, whether it's discrimination or whether it's harassment
Mhm.
or violent attacks of some sort, but in the land of Palestine?
Of course. How can you not live there and have it? I mean, I lived there running the school from 98 to 2005. So during the Second Intifada, a wall was built between my convent in Jerusalem and Bethany. So often I had to cross through checkpoints. I can't even count the number of times that I've had a gun in my face, or the barrel of a tank during a time of curfew. Once I was in Bethlehem, and it was curfew time, and we were trying to drive back, and we made a turn, trying to exit Bethlehem, and boom, there in front of us was a tank barrel. I think the soldiers in the tank were as nervous as we were, and got through. So, yeah, and the great challenge, and where I bow my head in humility to so many Palestinians, because I'm a foreigner and a woman, and in some ways I can get away with things at a checkpoint that a Palestinian man can't. So for example, if I'm at a checkpoint, I might show a little irritation towards a soldier when he puts his gun in my face and asks where I'm going. If you're a Palestinian man and you dare to offer any kind of rebuttal to a soldier, you're going to be pulled from that car, possibly beaten, detained, or possibly even shot. So and then I've been driving through a checkpoint. I remember one time, and I had a worker from Bet Sahur who was working at our school, and I'm in the car, and I look to my side, and there are a number of men on the side of the road that the soldiers have pulled out of a shared taxi, and they're just waiting there in the hot sun until the soldiers decide maybe we'll let them go through. So to have to endure that kind of humiliation with long suffering and with silence and without retaliating, I don't think Americans understand what courage and resilience that takes. So sometimes I'm ashamed at my lack of self-control when dealing with that situation. So to answer your question, yes, I faced, and we've had cases where people were shot outside the door of the school by Israeli soldiers, listening
And
to a
these are young
bomb.
children.
Sorry?
You said children were
Well, yeah,
shot at.
when I was at Bethany School, we had girls that lived with us, Christian boarding students, and their bedrooms were the windows were outside the main street of the town. And we remember one morning, the Israelis had called a curfew, which means nobody could be on the street. But there was one man who was walking up towards a soldier. I could see this through the window, and the soldier shot him in the eye. It turned out that the young man was a deaf mute, and he was actually from Hebron, which is like 20 miles south, but he had family there, and he was just going up to the soldier to try to understand what he was supposed to be doing. And instead of acting like a human, he shot him in the eye. The man survived, but he was a deaf mute, and now he's lost, the use of his eye. Yeah, that's just one instance. There's so many.
And we know Ma'ali Adumim is very close
Mhm.
to Al-Azarya, which Ma'ali
Correct.
Adumim, for anybody who doesn't know, is the largest settlement inside of the West Bank. Have you guys?
1996, it wasn't that large at all. This shows you what the continual progression of the settlements.
Yeah, and we know with the settlement plan that's coming up, it will continue to
Frightening.
expand even more.
Worse than
What?
that,
Mhm.
that plan will ultimately cut off the northern West Bank from the southern West Bank. They're trying to create this illusion by the building of tunnels and new roads, as if Palestinians, I don't know exactly the precise, I'm trying to understand actually with the plan, because Mali Adumim is to the east of Al-Azarya, and Jerusalem is to the west. They already have the wall blocking us from going directly. You know, it should only take me 5 minutes to get between Mount of Olives, where the convent is, to the school. But with the wall, you have to go towards Mali Adamim and come back. A 20-mile trip, which also has checkpoints, can make the trip even longer. Now, my understanding is that if you live in Al-Azarya, you won't even have access to that road to get into Jerusalem. And all people who live in Bethlehem into the southern part of the West Bank will sort of cut through Al-Azarya and that E1 extension, but won't be able to go towards Jerusalem at all. It's creating this fiction as if Palestinians make them disappear by the infrastructure that they create.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And like Mother Agapia said, if you don't see it, if you are going on these trips to quote unquote Israel and you're on Tel Aviv, you won't, there's a whole other life. There's a whole other life. That's why a lot of times you'll hear there is no occupation or apartheid. I saw, all of this. And I think this is so important for, these delegations, like you said, a lot of these pilgrimages that you're holding.
That I'm talking about, they go to the Palestinian community. They should, which is not the typical commercial.
What is the site that if people wanted to let others know about it, where can they learn more information about the pilgrimages that you provide?
Well, there's two groups. They're more than pilgrimages. They're Christian-oriented groups, but they're more fact-finding to understand the whole situation. So there's fosna.org, FOSNA.org, or Telos Group, TELOS Group.org, and they offer trips that are more oriented towards getting people to think about peaceful ways to end the conflict, but you also meet the communities. Our convent website is stnicholasconvent.org, and I'll put some information there for pilgrimages that it can be conducted. Or there's a group, BibleTrek.org, BibleTrek.org. And that's a Catholic-run organization. I know the tour guides there, and so they would provide the kind of tours and pilgrimages where people can really see what it's like for Palestinian Christians. Because I've been very frustrated. I'm a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, and sometimes people I know from America have gone on pilgrimages in the past, and they'll call me up, oh, we're here. Unfortunately, they generally would have Israeli, sometimes even Israeli Jewish tour guides who won't give them the full story, and they won't go, or let's say they go to Bethlehem. They'll zip in and out with the bus, don't see any local Christians, and don't really recognize, and it won't be pointed out to them. They may see the wall, but they won't realize the other things that are going on that are disrupting the life of the Palestinians there. So it makes me very sad when church organizations even use tour groups that don't show them the whole picture and don't unite them with the Christians that actually live there, their brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there just needs to be so much more involvement, so much more outreach on this topic to really educate the Christians in the West. My final question, I know we have a few people here that are on the panel that may want to ask a question as well, is, in what ways does being Palestinian shape your understanding of Christianity?
Sorry?
In what ways does being Palestinian shape your understanding of Christianity?
Well, like I think I mentioned before, for a Palestinian, first, it's their heritage, it's their culture, it's their land. So a Palestinian recognizes Christ almost as their friend and their ancestor, as a part of the family. And that creates such a different orientation so being a Christian in Palestine, it's just a natural outgrowth of your life, of your identity. You can't escape it. And quite frankly, even if you're a Muslim, that's a narrative we have to try to destroy, is that Muslims have respect for Jesus Christ. They have respect for the Mother of God. It's not unusual to see a Muslim person go into the Church of the Nativity or into the Holy Sepulchre and offer a prayer. So anyone who lives on that land should have a recognition of Christ and wanting to live like Christ as if he's your friend and your ancestor. So that it creates a whole different orientation. It's just so much more natural. And that's what I find so beautiful when I go to Palestinian Christian churches. There's just something so much more their heart is in it, just the reality of Christ. Many times I've heard stories where people, they naturally talk of miracles as if it's a natural occurrence in the life because it's the presence of Christ on that land that is just normal. I don't know how else to put it. Normal and natural. So, of
Well,
course, they have a deep faith. It may not be theologically a scholastic one, but it's a real one, an authentic one from the heart.
yeah, and like you just mentioned, Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Christians, we coexist. We live together side by side. You have the Church of Holy Sepulchre, who actually Muslims are the ones who hold the keys to that church. We are all brothers and sisters, and we are all facing the same occupation, the same apartheid, the same torture, and the same abuse, and the same systematic racism that is instilled inside under Israeli occupation. They do not differentiate whether you are Christian or whether you are Muslim. I am going to give a chance for the panelists to ask any questions that they may have. Mother Agapia, I really, really appreciate you answering my questions. And for everybody that's joining in, thank you so much for joining in. We do have Mother Agapia here with us talking about life as a Christian inside of Palestine, inside of the Holy Land. Let me open the panel, and we'll start with Lal. Go ahead, Lal.
Salam, guys. I hope all of you guys are doing well. Mother Agapia, good to have you here. Thank you, Tasnimo, for hosting this live. I'm glad that you did talk about the history of coexistence in Palestine among the different religions of Palestine, the Abrahamic faiths. So Mother Agapia, my main question, I have a follow-up afterwards, but the character of Palestinian life in Palestine, which of course in turn affects the Christian minority in Palestine, the character of Palestine is at risk right now. Okay, and it's at risk because of Israeli occupation, of course. According to current data, Christians in Palestine, and I'm talking about the occupied Palestinian territory, the OPT, it's less than 5% of the total population. Okay, most Christians have left the occupied Palestinian territory are now living living abroad. Okay, in diaspora. There is a common misconception and myth that is really being pushed out by Zionists that Christians are leaving Palestine, rather the OPT, because of what Zionists and the media call Islamic extremism. Okay. Can you please clarify the true answer on this? Why are Christians in Palestine leaving Palestine in such large numbers?
The first fundamental thing is that, the narrative that's promoted by the Zionists and by mass media is that that they're a Muslim jihadists, that they're all out to push out both the Jews and the Christians. Reality is far from that. I worked at the school in Bethany. The town of Al-Azarya and Abu Dis next to us, where our students were drawn from, is 98% Muslim. In our classrooms, we have icons and crosses. And there's never been any conflict with that. The Muslims and Christians have lived together in peace. Just like I said, the Muslims will even enter churches. There's a great commonality in our faiths. There's differences too, but we all have lived together in peace. So the reason that Christians have decreased in number has nothing to do with fear of Islamic violence or terror. Because like I said, but Palestinians, whether they're Muslim or Christian, both suffer under the occupation. Muslims leave too. The problem is that Christians were always a smaller percentage over the last centuries. So obviously, if they leave, there's going to be even a greater problem. But the problem, and any Palestinian Christian will tell you this, is the occupation that is imposed by the Israeli government. Because there's not economic opportunities, you're losing your land. Look, in Nablus, I have a young man who's the priest there. I was visiting him in September, and there's 600 Christians in Nablus, the city of Nablus. There was a family that owns a factory in June of this year, and that comprised 60 Christians between the 5 sons and the father that ran the factory. The Israelis came in, confiscated the equipment in June of this year, of 2025, and then 2 weeks later came in and blew up half the factory with no reasons. So what's the natural reaction of family men? I want my kids to be raised in safety and to be able to continue their life. So the reason they leave, if they leave, when they reluctantly leave, because it is their homeland, and then you have to go uproot and try to make a life in a new country and don't want to do that. But if it becomes impossible to live because of the weapons of the occupation, the confiscation, the economic strangulation, the lack of opportunities, the threat of death, that's the reason they're leaving, not because of Muslim violence.
Thank you. As a follow-up question, I do know that historic Palestine is not just what the international law calls the occupied Palestinian territory. There is also land that is within the Green Line of historic Palestine, what some people call the Israel proper, right?
Right.
So I know that there are Palestinian Christians who also live in that part of historic Palestine that have Israeli citizenship. Okay. Of course, they have more rights than Palestinians do in the OPT. However, they are being discriminated against. I know that there are Palestinians in the OPT, particularly Palestinian Christians who are raising awareness about how Christians are actually being treated in the OPT by the Israeli occupation. Is there something that you believe that, or do you believe that there is a stronger place or position of Palestinian Christians with Israeli citizenship who may have more rights than Palestinians in the OPT? Do you believe that there may be a place for those Christians to do more outreach on the conditions of Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory, to work with Western churches to expose the reality of Christians in historic Palestine, so that way we do not continue to see this surge of Palestinian Christians leave historic Palestine to not only change the character even more of Palestine, the Palestinian heritage and culture and identity, right? But to, of course, the Zionists are trying to eliminate all, Palestinian identity from historic
Either
Palestine,
side.
right? But as you said, right, importantly, Christians are an even bigger problem because we are already such a tiny minority and are almost completely extinct. I myself am a Palestinian Christian living in diaspora, so this is something particularly important to me. Please, thank you.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is that should the Christians that live within Israel, the other side of the Green Line, speak out more. The problem is, yes, you're right. They're not persecuted or harassed. They don't suffer the effects of the occupation, but they certainly, I don't even want to go into details because it's going on as we speak, but I know of Palestinian Christians that live in Haifa, in cities in Israel, and they're being harassed and persecuted. Like it might be a case where they're not giving permits for a building, or they have to be careful what they say at work. So to call upon them to be the ones to speak out for Palestinian Christians, yes, we can do that. And for example, I just saw today, Tucker Carlson again, for all what you think about, he's in Jordan right now, and he was interviewing the Anglican bishop who is based in Nazareth. So he gave him a platform to speak, and he did speak. And you just had a letter come out from all the heads of the churches in Jerusalem, and they've been a little bit more outspoken now, finally, saying clearly that there's an existential threat to the Christians in Palestine, and that the world has to wake up to that. So my answer to you would be that I don't think necessarily we should look not to the Christians in Israel. We should hear their voice, but the ones who should really be speaking out are all of us in the diaspora. You know the story now, because you know what the facts are. How many more facts do we need to know about how Christians are endangered, whether they live in Palestine, the OPT, or in Israel? So in the West, because the only way that things are going to change is through prayer, that's going to change the heart of the rulers to work towards peace, and through the real action of making change. And the ultimate change comes, sad to say, every other country in the world could say that they don't support Israel and doesn't want to give them weapons and wants them to be accountable for their war crimes. But unless the United States does something, nothing is going to change. So,
Yes.
and whether I was just in Australia, and they're getting a lot of pushback there. There's been large, support for Palestinians, but now they're also passing laws that it's considered anti-Semitic language if you're pro-Palestinian, right? I just met a newscaster who was put on trial because she's considered to be anti-Semitic for what she's saying in support of Palestine. So I think it's more incumbent upon the countries of the West, and particularly the United States, people in the United States, and the traditional Christian communities, the Greek Orthodox, the Catholics, to start using their influence and power to say to their politicians, you can't keep supporting these policies.
Can I ask one more
Thank you.
question, Tasnima?
In a bit, I actually have Huwaida Arraf is with us, and she's actually
Huwaida.
live from Taibe in Palestine. She is currently in Palestine, in Taibe right now, and I do want to give her a chance to speak real quick before she has to drop because the connection is a little bit choppy.
Was there another
Huwaida,
attack there yesterday? I saw some pictures. The cars were burned again and graffiti.
Yeah. Yes,
Yep.
there was. Hi, hello
Hi,
everyone.
Huwaida.
Mother Agapia,
Hello.
good to see
Yep.
you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I hope I can keep my connection. We are driving through on our way out of Taibe, where we spent a beautiful 4 hours with the people here, learning a little bit more about the village. I'm on leading a delegation for Eyewitness Palestine.
Fantastic.
And you're right, Mother Agapia. There was an attack here yesterday by settlers burning cars, graffiti on walls, and even today the soldiers raided and were harassing people. So it's everyday harassment, attacks either by soldiers or settlers or both in Taibe and all Christian village in the occupied West Bank, as there are attacks on Palestinian villages throughout the occupied West Bank. And because you are talking about 48, I am a 48 Palestinian, although I do live in the United States, but my family is here in 48. And yes, I just want to reaffirm what Mother Agapia was saying, the pressure on them and the oppression. Of course, nothing like what's happening in the West Bank or Jerusalem or Gaza, because there are layers of oppression, right? There are layers of apartheid. But for example, my goddaughter is a doctor. I mean, she has to treat Israelis who come in armed, right? And who try to provoke her in terms of her politics. They're not allowed to speak. You can't like a Facebook post. You can't feel with the children of Gaza, for example, on social media. You are completely silenced, in addition to a lot of other restrictions on Palestinians. Because in the end, Israel doesn't want any Palestinians on this land at all. And there are different levels of oppression and different tactics used to silence us and to push us out. So a lot of Palestinians in 48, at least I know my family, they see as one of the most important things that they can do is stay rooted in the land, refuse all attempts to get rid of them as their form of resistance. That's not to say they couldn't do more, but that is seen as a very powerful form of resistance for the Palestinians in 48.
But they pay a price if they do more.
Do you want to ask anything? Yes, they absolutely do. We were just earlier this morning meeting with B'Tselem and Amnesty International, and they brought up the case of Walid al-Daqqa, who was a Palestinian citizen of Israel, imprisoned for decades in Israeli jails, and he was the last year or two of his life.
They finally released him.
yes, I know she is. They're driving, and in the West Bank, it can get a little bit choppy. But yeah, go ahead, Mother Agapia.
Well, you can't belittle that point. I don't live within Israel proper, but I have heard sort of the people. There's discrimination. The infrastructure that's allowed in Arab communities, Palestinian communities in Israel, is lesser than in other parts. And particularly look at Jerusalem, which is also considered, go to Shofat or go to the neighborhoods that are Palestinian. The Shofat's covered by a wall. Those people pay taxes to Israel, to Jerusalem, but don't get the kind of benefits that people in West Jerusalem get. So there's that kind of discrimination, worse in Jerusalem, but also up in the northern parts of Israel. Like I said, you may not get a permit to build a new house or to do work on your house. And it's a way of making life difficult for the Palestinians that live in Israel. And like she said, the biggest action they can take is that whatever you do with us, we're going to stay here. That's the biggest statement. And so we have to witness to that in the West, though, that this unfairness, don't listen to the narrative that Christians are treated well by the state of Israel, because that's just not the fact.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Mother Agapia. And I know hopefully Huwaida, if she gets a better connection, she will join us again. We'll go to our sister Linda. Go ahead, Linda. Linda is actually my co-host, and she was really, really excited when she heard that you were going to be joining us. So go ahead, Linda.
Salam, everybody. Greetings, Mother Agapia. Peace be upon you. It is a pleasure to meet you. I thank you for your advocacy. I initially was going to ask you about the realities that Palestinian Christians face on a daily basis. However, you described that in great detail. So thank you for that. The second portion of my question was relating to Jesus, peace be upon him, who was born in Bethlehem. And if he were alive on earth today, he would be considered a Palestinian. Yet there seems to be a major disconnect here with the rise of Christian Zionism. He's celebrated on two major holidays annually in the West, and no one seems to recognize or acknowledge the plight of Palestinian Christians or Palestinians in general. Why do you think that they lean more towards Zionism? And what is the one message you would like to relay to your fellow Christians regarding the reality that they face on a daily basis in Palestine?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't raised a Protestant, but so the only thing I can say is that orientation has been developed over the last couple of centuries that puts such primacy on the idea of Israel and the land of Israel as being so important. And, I just want to say to that, I'm a Christian and the holy sites are very important to me. We take pilgrimages, but that doesn't mean we create ownership or that we insist that we are the only ones that can be on that land. So there is that distinction where it's very bizarre that someone who calls themselves a Christian somehow feels that the people of the state of Israel and the Jews in particular somehow should be given a right to control the land. It should be a land for everybody. You say we think about Christ who was born there. Christ was a Christian and he said, you follow me, this is the way. But that wasn't an exclusivity. Right? We have the story of the Good Samaritan, that always in his teachings, it was to have respect and brotherhood with all human beings, whatever their faith belief was. So I think evangelical Christians have caused great harm to the Christians of the Holy Land by trying to promote this idea that we have to support Israel and denying the life of the Christians that are actually living there. So I think they have to get back to their Christian roots. Look back to what the Jesus actually preaches and told them. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those that help the poor, right? So that's all I can say. I can't understand. I don't know, because I wasn't raised a Protestant, why that became such an emphasis, but I think they just have to get back to the basic principles of Christianity and that they would recognize then. And also think of the very hymns. I assume they sing songs like, "O Little Town of Bethlehem," right? Think about who's in Bethlehem, where Christ was, and have some respect and support for the Christians that are there in the places where Christ was from.
Thank you, Mother Agapia.
Thank you, Linda. I actually wanted to kind of elaborate on that question. Your answer right now saying, think about where he is. A lot of times you'll hear Zionists saying, well, Bethlehem is in Judea and Samaria, not in Palestine. What would your response be to that specific answer that we hear all the time by many Christian Zionists and Zionists themselves?
You want to answer? What do those names mean anyway? Whether it's Judea and Samaria or whether it's Palestine, you still treat the people with respect. Using the connotation of Judea and Samaria harks back to a time to the tribes of Israel, right? Well, time has moved on. And the Palestinians were there and have been there. So again, that just comes to the point of trying to take ownership of a land rather than living in peace with the people that are actually living there. That's the problem. The reality
Yeah.
is that there are Palestinians living in Bethlehem, there's Palestinians living in Jerusalem, there's Palestinians living in Nazareth, and they have a right to live there and to live in peace.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mother Agapia. Huwaida is back. Huwaida, do you hear us? Let me see if she can hear us. I know that it is a little bit choppy, but if she's able to unmute. But otherwise, we will go. Thank you so much, Linda, for your question. We'll go to Holly. Go ahead, Holly.
So, if you had asked me 3 years ago that I would be fangirling a nun on a TikTok live that I saw on
It was on
Tucker.
Tucker Carlson.
Yes, I am one of those. And
Right.
I would like to say that you are extremely important because you are piercing through the subcategories that they have created in the United States and in Western nations that make it so that you only listen to Tucker Carlson to talk about religion if you're of that religion and no one else. And when I sat and listened to you, the reason I'm fangirling is because I wish that I had met someone like you when I was young, because Palestine and people like you have made me go back and relook at life and values, history, and have made me seek out understanding religion. And so everybody in this room, I just want to say that you are making a fundamental difference. And the reason why I have to say this is because I was a dean at a college. I had a master's degree. I was successful in the United States and I knew nothing about Palestine. And I took classes on Africa, and whatever it was that made me not see it, I see it now. And so can you talk about the notion of piercing through those bubbles of information that we allow ourselves to silo in, and how to really claim that space and make people look at the words of the hymns they're reading? Like, you did something that people aren't doing here. Do you know how important that was? Did you know when you did it?
No,
It was
I
huge.
understand that there's been a strong influence now. And I think, to Tucker's credit, I think he recognized, because unfortunately, it's sad to say, because I know so many Palestinians who could speak eloquently about their situation, but they wouldn't be noticed. So here comes an old white woman, a nun, who talks about what's going on there. And I think that gives people have to sort of wake up that, oh, there isn't an agenda there. It's someone who is just witnessing to what she lived through. So, again, I always bow before the Palestinians who have struggled for so many years and their voices haven't been heard. Palestinians, and Muslims and Christians all over the world that story hasn't been heard. But I think I want to get to another point. So all we have to do is, be thankful for people who are starting to offer the avenues for people to hear the story. And you go and hear the story, go and visit the Holy Land and see what's there and speak out. So everybody at whatever level we are just has to not keep quiet, just has to speak out. But the other thing I want to speak to, because I think it made you recognize Palestine, but it also recognized something about faith. I've often said this is not a conflict, it's not a religious conflict, in that it's not a conflict between Muslim and Jew. But I think what's also resonating with people, and we're also seeing it in the connection between the IDF and ICE and the control that leaders have over people, is that the religious battle that's going on, for myself as a Christian, it's that the Christians of Palestine are being disappeared. And the land of Christ is being disappeared by trying to Judaize the land and wipe out any references to both Christians and Muslims there. So it's silencing the voice of Christ. So the real battle that's going on, and it's Christ and it's the Creator. The beauty of Palestinians is that they represent something that represents the goodness of humanity, which is so ironic because they've been labeled with the label of terrorist. And if anybody really knows the Palestinian and Palestinian culture, think of the people of Gaza and the poetry and the art, and that's all. And all of that is an expression of people who are thankful to their Creator. So whether you're a Christian or Muslim, a Jew, or a person of good faith, it's a battle between those who want to control us and are only governed by lust for money and for power, versus those who want a world that is based on Christian principles, on principles of faith and goodness that say we have to live in peace with our brother. And so I think that's the real thing that's going on, and that's even resonating with people, is that we're tired of being under control of people who do not desire the good of us, the good for us, and only good for a few. And so I think it has parallels for the rest of the world, and that's why maybe it's making its mark too.
Thank
I
you.
hope that made a little bit of sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Taz dropped me for whatever. Thank you so much. This live was
Thank
so
you.
helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you. We'll go. Huwaida is approaching Jerusalem, so hopefully the connection will be better here soon. Oh, can you hear us, Huwaida?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. We just passed a checkpoint. We went through a checkpoint of called
Pisma?
Pisma because we're in an Israeli plated bus.
Right.
Yes, so you can to Taibe, of course, and all of the residents, Palestinian Christians that live in Taibe, cannot go to Jerusalem. They cannot come through. They cannot drive on the road that we were on or come through the Hezma checkpoint that we were on. They'd have to go through back roads and villages, and then the Kalandia checkpoint, which is so humiliating and tedious. And it looks it'd be easier for you to go to another country just to explain the terminals that they've created and the warped way that they treat people, and how you have to submit yourself to body checks and ID checks, and Israel can turn you back and would turn most residents of Taibe back, not allow them to go to Jerusalem, to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or to go on south to Bethlehem to the Church of the Nativity, because they are Palestinian Christians or Palestinian Muslims, because they are Palestinians and they're confined to their ghettos. Another thing, I don't know if most listeners know, that the Palestinian villages throughout and town cities throughout the West Bank, if they're not walled in, there are places that they can't go. They certainly cannot go to Jerusalem without special permission. Even sometimes if they need medical treatment that's not available where they are, they have to get special permission, which is not easy to get. And if they do get it, they have to go through the hassle of traveling in the way I just described, that is a hassle and intended to humiliate. And you're totally at the mercy of 18, 19, 20-year-old soldiers with guns and on a power trip. But some of these places also are completely closed off. So whether you can even leave your own town and city or village is controlled by soldiers. You have and checkpoints. You have some villages in the West Bank where you have to be from that village to go in and out, and sometimes with special hours that the soldiers can impose it whenever they want. So if you're not from that village, you can't even go visit. They're in that much of a cage, and there's these different levels of control, but again, all intended to treat Palestinians as less than human. They're totally at the mercy of the Israeli state, of a settler colonial project that wants to get rid of them, totally dominated. And any kind of resistance is at all, even nonviolent resistance, which I've participated in with Palestinians for years, is brutally suppressed. And one thing that the delegation that I'm on, people that we meet with, the thing that you hear most from Palestinians is just go tell people that all we want is our freedom. Tell them our story. Tell them what you see, because Palestinians realize that they've been dehumanized not only by the Israeli settler colonial project, but by all of the Israel supporters.
Yeah. I think Huwaida's point, that's the thing too. We talked about if you go on a pilgrimage or you go on a tour, you don't necessarily notice the things. Person comes on a pilgrimage, they fly into Tel Aviv and they take Highway 443 or Highway 1 into Jerusalem. If you see a highway, but if you look to your left as you're driving in, you might see cement cubes. And that's what she's talking about. Beyond those cubes are Palestinians living in villages that are not able to get out of the village. They leave their cars on the outskirts there and have to walk in, and they're at the whims of the Israeli soldiers, whether they'll be able to actually get access in or out of their own village. So this apartheid and this dehumanization of Palestinians is constant, but not always visible to the eye of a visitor. That's going on right now, and has been going on for decades. And also, I want to speak to too that it just reminded me of they try to argue that the Palestinians always use violence. In those villages, in Bilin, in other Budras, Palestinians have used nonviolent resistance. On Fridays, have gone and demonstrated peacefully to try to say, stop confiscating our land, give us permits to be able to build on our land. And they're met first by tear gas, then by rubber bullets and bullets. So you constantly go and try to protest nonviolently, and you're met with violence by the Israeli forces. And we have to recall the tie-in. ICE, enforcement organizations, and police departments in America are training, not with police departments in Israel, but with the IDF, and they are learning the tactics of the Israeli destruction forces that aren't there to protect the population, but are there to kill.
Yeah, and don't forget, even after all of those, peaceful protesting in terms of permits and them being shot at or having tear gas thrown at them, they also demolish your home on top of
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So, that's something also to acknowledge for everybody that's listening, that you also get your home removed and you become homeless in your own land. We'll go next to Tailpipe. Go ahead, Tailpipe.
Hi, Mother Agapia. Thank you so much for everything you do. I'm a little bit different in regards to my panel. They are much, much better than I am because I hold very drastically different views. I don't believe in the peaceful nonviolence. However, I find it to be the height of moral bankruptcy that the Catholic Church, which is headquartered in Rome, is allowing for this to happen. And I say that they're allowing for it to happen because with the central control of over 1 billion Catholics around the world, they have the ability to marshal actual resources. They have the ability to actually affect commerce. And again, you understand my position I'm against the nonviolence. I don't believe that you can offer roses to somebody offering you bullets. However, the Catholic Church is that moral compass, supposedly. I find the actions of people like the Pope and all the successive popes to be the height of cowardice, because there are nonviolent actions that could be taken, such as a full-fledged BDS campaign that would have reverberations throughout all of Europe, that would have reverberations throughout all of the United States. Again, there are over 1 billion Catholics that would marshal resources to end this. And it could be done in a non-violent way.
I don't disagree with you. I'm actually an Orthodox Christian, not Catholic. And just for, at least we have seen, there was Pope Francis before, and actually the Latin Patriarch in Jerusalem has been very outspoken and very open about the genocide that's taking place, and very much showing his allegiance and support, and deriding what the Israelis are doing, support for the Palestinians. But you're right, as a body, that's what's so frustrating, is that the churches, the traditional churches, whether they be Catholic or Orthodox, if the leaders were to call upon their people and say, this is a problem and you all have to start addressing it, we could make a difference. So I can't speak for why the hierarchs are doing what they're doing, the bishops what we're doing. All I can be, I'm a Christian, and I'm going to speak to my Christians and let them know what's going on. There's a very good priest I know in the Pittsburgh area who works with the poor where he is, does all he can for the local community, and also has spoken out for the Palestinian community and the injustice that's going on there. And rather than bemoan the fact of the lack of effort and voice of the leadership, you just go and do what you can do. Maybe it seems a frustrating answer, a weak answer, but instead of trying to think about changing them, you just think about the person next to you and keep that chain building and work on that. Work in your local parish, work with person. It's frustrating because that's all I can tell you. And I'm all for sanctions and boycotts. Absolutely. As a University of Michigan person too, I started out as a student back in 1977. And remember marching for the university to divest from companies that were supporting South Africa. So those methods can work and should work, and we shouldn't be afraid to use them,
I mean,
whatever capacity we are, whether religious or not religious.
the word weakness should never be associated with you, because considering the actions that you've taken and the way that you've put your, not only your mind and body on the line, I just find it to be odd, and I'm using that as a polite word because of who you are. Normally, I would use very different language.
Yeah.
But again, and I understand the religious aspect, the kingdom of God is inside of all of us. I understand all of that. That's something that the Pope or somebody would deflect. But I feel like the heart, or the central location where you have actual biblical ties to Christianity as a whole. And I don't view them in sects where Orthodox, Christian,
Right.
I look at them all as uniform. Yeah, I look at them all as uniform. I understand that there are minor nuances here or there, but I feel like the literal heart of Christianity is being wiped away. That's not, and I don't think that's an exaggeration or
It's not.
hyperbolic on my part, because they're literally doing it. They're doing it in front of our eyes also.
Right.
So I feel like there's and it's not talked about per se, but the so-called, and specifically the so-called Christians of the United States, they're morally bankrupt also, because their racism takes priority over their actual faith and belief. Again, when you tied in what's happening with ICE, the majority of those people that they're looking to deport are Christians. They're Catholics. So their rampant racism takes priority over what they see happening in Palestine, because they see a white face in the Israeli public from Europe that is colonizing, and they identify with that, considering what they have done all around the world. So I just, it's not that I lose my faith per se, but I have no faith or no belief in the organized religion and the hierarchy that claims to be the patriarch of the religion. I have no faith in them.
Well, that from the beginning of Christianity, there was a gospel. We read passages every day. And just last week, there was the passage, and it dealt with Jesus going into the temple and forcing out the money changers. So this has actually been a problem from time immemorial. There's always that balance between those who bow and focus their efforts on just retaining power or concerns about money, and not on the true message of Christ or of goodness in the world. So that's just a perpetual battle. It's a sad reality. So I prefer to take my energies. I can only speak out and witness to what I see. And if that changes the hearts of our hierarchs to then take action, great. If it doesn't, I'm still going to act, right? Bottom line, we still have to do what we can do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mother Agapia. Thank you, Tailpipe, for that question. And then we'll go to Mo. Go ahead, Mo.
Actually, Linda 100% like almost copied my brain and asked you exactly what I had to say. So she covered it head to toe. But on what Tel was saying, I agree. If you're offered roses for bullets, it's not an exchange that you can passively, take part in. You have to stand 10 toes down, and you've done that. Israel's targeted, I don't even know how many people for coming out with their political. Hey, Taz, you can drop better days. That's actually me. But anyways, they've come out and they've targeted pretty much anybody that's stood against them in the ways that you are. And, just thank you. That's awesome. And this is just a show of how much Christians and Muslims have in common and do stand together is what you're doing, because I'm Muslim, you're Christian,
right,
and we're brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, I think that's the really important
we have
lesson
to
that
use
needs
the
to be
tools at our
spread.
disposal. How did the Christian, maybe violence is the way, but the practical implication is that, that Christians United for Israel, the Christian evangelical lobby groups, which are actually stronger than AIPAC, have more influence, I believe, on our politicians. They started out as relatively small. So some of us have to focus on using our energies to build up that political base that is going to affect the real change. Okay, and we're not doing enough of that. So that would really be my biggest statement today, is that you've heard the message, you know what's going on there, take the practical steps that are needed to build up the voices that are going to put into power politicians that are going to do the right thing when it comes to the Palestinians.
Thank you. Thank you, Mo. And go ahead, Brother Zuhair.
First of all, salam to Sister Gabia. I hope that I spell your name correctly. We appreciate your sincerity and telling the truth. Hopefully, they can invite you to the Congress or the senators, in Washington, and you can show the whole world what we pass through. And what you mentioned about the village Taiba, I know the village very well. I went to in school with some brothers from there, like Nicola, Hannah, etc. And we have no problem. And if you have seen in that area, they have these species, demons, the demon species. They are uprooting olive trees in the whole area, in all the villages in that area on daily basis. And they are preventing, as you said, like if you want to, or Sister Huwaida, what she was saying, if she want to travel from one place to another place, it takes people hours and hours to pass through. If that guy, 18 years soldier, or he or she have like the message, or they want to let you in or not, or they can keep you in the checkpoint for forever. We don't know. I mean, thanks for your sincerity. And I was going to mention, I listened to your speech with Tucker as well, his in Jordan yesterday. It's beautiful. And I hope that a lot of Christian brothers, they can listen and see what the Muslims, the Christians, whether it's in Palestine, in Jordan, we coexist and we love each other no matter what. Right. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to add one thing about, we can take very specific actions. When I was in Taiba, the village he just mentioned, they uproot the olive trees, confiscating making it impossible. The Israeli settlers there, when I was there in September, I also saw them. Israeli settlers were on a tractor of the land belonging to people from Taiba, plowing over the land. They had rifles in their hand, guns that are within the defense bills that American politicians vote for. They sent 50,000 of these guns to Israel. Smotrich, who's the defense minister, security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, very proudly took those guns and gives them to the settlers. So that's very directly showing how U.S. taxpayers are just as much complicit in what's happening, the persecution of the Palestinians. So that's one thing, very pointed fact that we can go to our senator and to our representative and say, why are we giving guns to these people to kill Christians and take over the land of Christians and Muslims in Palestine? And say, no, you're not going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And
also,
thank you so much.
One point. Whatever, sometimes these senators, I think they are idiot when they mention like who bless Israel will be blessed and who cares Israel will be cursed. I think this is related to Prophet Israel, which is Jacob. It's not the country. And we say, bless Israel, bless Prophet Jacob, bless our beloved Prophet Jesus as well, Muhammad. We pray for all of them. We don't differentiate. So these people, they are idiots based upon what they believe, and they want their followers to believe in.
Yeah. Thank you, Brother Zuhair. Thank you so much, Mother Agapia, for being with us. I just wanted to get a final word from you, a final message for everybody that is listening. What can Christians abroad do to help raise awareness about what Palestinian Christians are going through under occupation?
Yeah. Well, I'm on the West Coast right now. I was at a Presbyterian church. I'll be at an Orthodox church tonight. They showed films discussing the plight of the Christians in the Holy Land. There's one, The Stones Cry Out, Forbidden Pilgrimage. So in your local parish, call upon them to say, we should have a night and we should discuss the situation of the Christians in the Holy Land. And then they should also create a network have the young people in your community meet up with the communities overseas. And so to build that awareness and tell your priest, we want to take a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and we want to go and visit our Palestinian Christian brothers and sisters. And then with that education, you have the ability then to come back and advocate. Right? Like I said, you have the conservative Christians who right to life issues are important for them. So they go and march in Washington and talk to their congresspeople. Well, we have to make this issue of the decimation of the Christian presence in the Holy Land, both the living people and the holy sites themselves being disappeared. We have to make that of primary importance and advocate politically and with prayer.
And somebody asked if you can make a quick prayer for the Holy Land and all those that are suffering under Israeli occupation, if you would like.
Okay, usually we don't do usually open prayer in our country, but we do have a prayer that our bishops blessed. But I'll just recall one line of it, and it's just to pray for the strength and endurance for those who are suffering under occupation now, and pray that the hearts of the rulers may change, that they may work towards peace.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mother Agapia, for joining us today. I thank you for your efforts, for speaking out and telling the truth about Palestinian Christians and their life under occupation. Please, I pray that you are protected. I know that when you speak out, you have this kind of target on you by Israel. So I thank you so much for all of your efforts, and continue to pray that God protects you, and also your pilgrimages that you do. I hope that more people get involved in that. I think it was FOSNA. FOSNA.org for anybody that wants to look into some of these pilgrimages that you can join, or let other people know so they can actually see the truth about what goes on in Palestine what goes on to Palestinian Christians inside of occupied Palestine under Israeli.
And also, where Hueda was just on, Eyewitness Palestine is another great group that organizes trips and
delegations
and sort of focuses. You could be a medical worker, or you could be a writer, or you could be a person of faith, and they'll organize a trip that will be oriented towards your you'll see all of Palestine, but you'll also have people that are of similar interests too as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know they just had one back in October. They had a delegation for the olive tree picking and the harvesting. Yep. So definitely, there's so many ways to get involved and to really
and then politically, a new policy. Josh Paul and Tara Kabash. I suggest people to give this, because they're totally focused on Israel and Palestine. So, what Kufi was 20 years ago, a new policy, smaller in membership and advocacy, but if people give their support, that kind of group can become a strong influence on the Hill, and that's where the change will come, practical change.
God willing, God willing. Thank you so much, Mother Agapia. It's been an honor to have you with us and to hear from you. And again, we will continue to follow along your journey in exposing the truth about what Palestinian Christians go through. Thank you.